Welcome to the NUS Conference 2020 election hustings for the Vice President Higher Education. I'm your host, Kami Nzeram, and joining me today are your election candidates. Hilary J.B. Ababio from the University of Bristol Students' Union. Say hi, Hilary.
Hiya.
Sajjad Hussain from London South Bank University Students' Union. Say hi, Sajjad.
Hi.
Ross Lovett from University College Birmingham Guild of Students. Hi, Ross.
Hi.
And Maisie Sanders at Birkbeck College Students' Union. Hi, Maisie.
Hi.
So lots of questions have come in from the electorate, but before we get on to that, we just wanted to hear directly from the candidates themselves. Why would they make, in their view, the best Vice President Higher Education? To kick us off, 2 minutes each, try and keep to time if you can. Maisie Sanders.
Hi, thank you. I'm Maisie. I'm a mature student at Birkbeck College in London, and I'm a trained teacher as well. I'm a socialist, and I've been active in the student movement since 2014, fighting against fees and cuts and things like standing in solidarity with education workers. This year, I've been building support for the UCU strike on my campus and helping to spread that support nationally as well. With other activists at the universities, we're talking now about how we can help the strike win and keep fighting with campus trade unions against all of the inequalities and injustices that marketisation creates in our universities. And I'm running for Vice President Higher Education because I think NUS and student unions should be leading this kind of fight. So there are about 5 million people in further education or higher education in the UK. And overwhelmingly, our concerns are the same as working class young people. Our concerns are about low pay and high rents that our loans don't go anywhere near covering. And they're about public transport that works for everyone, about a decent health service, about provisions for mental health difficulties and reducing stress, inequality, and overbearing surveillance that makes mental health problems such a big issue in our lives. And our concerns are about campuses that aren't accessible to disabled students, about racism, sexism, and transphobia, and we're concerned about the future of the planet. In colleges and universities, students and workers fundamentally want the same thing, an education that we have some say over, an education that's about improving lives in a society where a degree doesn't have to be a life raft, because everybody can find jobs that offer dignity and fair pay, whatever their educational backgrounds. And to make these voices heard, and to be winning these kinds of fights, we need a democratic NUS and democratic student unions. That means student unions that are run by democratic organisations of students, that are run by mass general assemblies and elected student officers making decisions, not unaccountable and unelected trustee boards and senior managers. It means the right to hold meetings, to put up posters, to organise on our campuses. And it also means NUS, where we have a conference that prioritises having the time and space for democratic political debate so that we can talk about what our demands should be and how we can go about winning them. I'm involved in the student movement because I think that if these voices are heard, the voices of these millions of students, the working class millions of students who aren't engaged in NUS right now, but should be, then our society will start looking a lot better.
Right. Maisie Sanders, thank you very much indeed. Hilary J.B. Ababio, over to you. Why would you make the best NUS VP Higher Education?
Hiya, thank you. So my name is Hilary J.B. Ababio, and I'm currently the Undergraduate Education Officer at Bristol SU. And I'm running for Vice President of Higher Education, or VPHE, if you want to be colloquial, because the next 2 years for NUS is crucial in rebuilding the organisation to really work for students. I'm running for this role because I am passionate about empowering, engaging, and enabling students. I strongly believe that by connecting with students and working with them and for them, we can make change that is really positive and meaningful for students. What I will bring to the role of VPHE is an extensive track record of bringing students to the table and making them partners and co-creators in all the work that I do. I've done this with the Decolonizing the Curriculum work at Bristol, engaging students with the NUS through the People's Vote campaign and our recent referendum, and through my work with previous NUS officers in feeding into and shaping the BAME attainment gap research. Students have continuously told me that they want to see an NUS that represents them, no matter where they sit on the political or factional spectrum. I want that for them too. With me, you'll get someone who's prepared to listen, learn, and engage with people from across the membership, with a view to bring us together as a union that works with students at the heart of everything it does. Finally, you get me. You get someone whose heart is in the movement, who cares deeply about your lives and experiences, and who will do everything possible to make sure that you can have a student experience that matches up to the prospectuses. Please, if you want that, vote me for VPHE.
Hilary J.B. Babio, thank you very much indeed. Sajjad Hussain, what would you bring to the role as VP Higher Education?
I strongly believe that education is a people's right and it should be free for all. I came into the UK in 2011 as an international student and I was isolated, struggling with no support. I missed seminars, social, deadlines and dates because mental health support wasn't there. I could never identify myself as an average student, but I didn't stop. I stepped in. I started being a course rep, a society president, international student officer, student ambassador, and two consecutive years vice president education at my students' union, because I care about the students that felt the same as what I felt in my personal experience. So it is deeply unfair for our students when it comes to UCU strikes. International students pay so much tuition fees, including home students, and they miss lessons for 2-3 weeks. What are the solutions? What NUS can do for those students who suffers a lot, not attending the lectures, but paying so much money? My campaign will start to rebuild the relationship across the country with the unions, because NUS is trying to rebuild the relationship with the union so that we can deliver the campaigns and we can achieve through our campaigns. What government wants to do is work with NUS closely. The relationship is not there. And my priority would be to make that relationship with the government, with the external bodies, to build a stronger union, a stronger NUS, which can help thousands of millions of students to achieve their goal, to become successful in their job sector. So the current issues that students are facing, continuing dissatisfactions with the assessment and feedback and course organizations when it comes to timetabling for those at mercy of public transport, evidenced by LSS. High tuition fees for international and home students, in addition to no fault of our members, find themselves studying in a university sector that is losing the trust of the UK at public at large. Stories of excessive vice chancellor pay, grade inflation, and unfair degree algorithms are embarrassing and distract from the achievements of our members. Outside the university, the issues, abusive landlord practices, raising poverty level among students, and raising hate crime and all manners of harassments against a wide range of students. I remember during my study, Tesco meal deal, 3-pound meal deal was my regular lunch, and I know how hard it is for students to survive when it comes to finance. So removing students' poverty is my #1 priority too.
Thank you very much indeed, Sajjad Hussain, for that outline. Lastly, of the 4 candidates standing for VP Higher Education, Ross Lovett, what would you bring to the party?
Thank you. If it wasn't for my students' union, I wouldn't be in education right now, let alone even being the president of the Guild of Students. I don't like seeing people being pushed about. It's something that really sets me off. When we went to officer training back in the summer, we did some work on our values, and I realised just then how much injustice and unfairness means something to me. So representing students to me is about tackling that injustice. It's about giving a chance for those without a voice, not to be spoken for, but to be given the space and tools to push back on being kept quiet so they can speak up. It's about understanding that student issues aren't just about what they say, but it's about what they need. I want to be involved in NUS because I think I can bring a different perspective to the National Union. I come from a vocational union, a working class university with local students and international students, and they mix to create this amazing community. For some of our students, it's the first time they've found a place that listens to them. And it's terrible that that's the case, but it shows what we can be for our students, and I think that NUS could be for our student unions. NUS is changing, and we have a chance to shape it. I'm passionate about it, and I want to help it be the best possible NUS it can be. And that's why I'm running for VPHE.
Ross, love it. Thank you very much indeed. And all four of you have spoken so passionately about the importance of community when it comes to representing students as a body at large. And on that note, I wanted to move to our first question. And Ross, you'll be first to respond to this first question. The question comes from the University of Bristol Students' Union and the Students' Union of Royal Holloway, London. So Ross first. What would your approach be to working with stakeholders such as higher education institutions, regulators, and other relevant organisations to achieve positive change for students and gain credibility for the NUS to compromise and achieve rather than simply campaign? So Ross, how are you going to work with those stakeholders to actually achieve?
Okay. I think it's clear from this question that there's a lack of faith in NUS with some of its members. But still, you're engaging and looking to make it better, and that's something that NUS really needs to embrace, and it's something that I'll be put front and centre of my work. We have to hear what you want from us. From my work at UCB, we've turned around the Students' Union from something that really didn't create much positive change for students. As an organisation, it's starting to make real important impacts on campus. We did that by listening to what students want, listening to what they were saying, but beyond that, those who really engaged, so the not some traditional engaged students, but not by losing those who cared for us all along. I don't think it's impossible to square this. I've said it in my manifesto. I want to lead an NUS that's able to hold the breadth of our movement instead of just being distracted by infighting. We have to start by acknowledging that NUS has won things and done good things, but it can do more. Look, NUS will pass 6 key priorities this year at conference, and we'll win by not trying to cram in 100 of other things. So we've got to give these ideas and the resource and the attention they deserve, because this is what our membership is telling us that they want. I'll be sure that we prioritise campaigning to achieve positive change for students. Campaigning is important. We're a campaigning union, but by campaigning it means much more about bringing positive change and nothing else. It's not one specific tactic. It's not one single approach, whether that's working with the Office for Students, lobbying the government, or going on a demonstration. I believe all these tactics have a place, but we have to do what we will do to bring positive change. Should the world want our members and us from our society and what they need, I'll lead an action-focused NUS that puts its resources into changing student lives. Thank you.
Ross, thank you very much indeed. Maisie, how would you deal with this issue of compromise and actually achieving stuff?
So I think this question's posed a bit wrong, to be honest. I think we're a union. We represent students who are low-paid workers and students who face all sorts of problems in their lives. I don't think that our stakeholders are HE institutions. I think our stakeholders are students. They're workers in our universities and in education, and they're trade unions who represent these education workers. I think that, you know, they are the people who make our institutions function and the people who are facing the same issues that we are. And we've seen this in the UCU strike this term and the last time, where students and workers on campus are facing the same issues, particularly around COVID-19 now. Are we going to be entitled to sick pay? Are we going to get full pay if we have to self-isolate? And many of us as students who work in hospitality, won't be entitled to that, and many of our teaching staff and cleaning staff and security staff and cafe workers in our universities also won't be entitled to the same thing, because our universities are run like businesses by senior management on huge six-figure salaries, while huge numbers of the staff that teach us and work in our universities are not paid enough to live on, with no job security, with huge gender and BME pay gaps and unmanageable workloads. And like I said, students who work, whether it's in our student union cafe or bars in town, face the same issues. And these staff working conditions are our learning conditions too. So I think that we need to work out who our friends are and who our friends aren't. And our friends are education workers, trade unions, students, people in our communities who are struggling with the same issues that we are, of poverty, rent, cuts. For medical students, nursing students, PGCE students, it's doctors, other teachers, and the unions that fight for them. So I think if we want to get anything changed in our education system and in society, then we need to be sitting around the table with the stakeholders that I've just listed, not the ones that are mentioned in the question. And on campaigning, I think, we're in a union, we're in the business of campaigning. We should campaign more and we should campaign better, and we should make a business of reaching out to all of those real stakeholders that I've just explained.
Maisie, thank you. Hilary, JB Ababio, where do you stand? Interesting points made by Maisie about solidarity. But as to the question and working with higher education institutions and other relevant organizations in particular, how do you work with, how do you create that sense of camaraderie?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting question, and I'm a bit happy because it's come from my union as well. So I'm happy my students at Bristol are engaged. I think it cuts right to the heart of some of the issues that NUS has faced over the years. So I think it's really important that we look closely at what it means for us to work with these institutions and also represent the students that are members of NUS. Let's not pretend. Our HE sector is complicated. We've got OFSs, QAAs, OIAs, CMAs, UUKs, and all the rest. All of us sat in the same boat, each of us with different agendas. It's all a bit confusing, not least for all of the acronyms, which if you want to find out what they mean, you could Google it. It doesn't really matter. And this is without the devolved nations too. I think a new and reformed NUS calls for a new and reformed approach. This is a chance to wipe the slate clean and reinvent ourselves as an organization which is going to cut through the noise with clear and concise asks, all of which are aimed at getting students the best possible educational experience. This means switching up our approach. We shouldn't take for granted the power of direct action, like protests and occupations that have seen successes in institutions like Goldsmiths and Warwick. However, it is important that NUS is strategic and tactical in its approach to driving change in the education sector. We need to be prepared. We need to be as prepared to sit at the table as we are to make noise and push directly for our voices to be heard. With an NUS that combines these two tactics well, we will be unstoppable. We're never all going to agree, students, universities, government, and sector bodies, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try and work together. I'm a strong believer in education, the ability to learn. If we aren't prepared to educate and be educated, we'll never achieve and actually win for students. It's important that as NUS, we start to build relationships, rebuild our own credibility, and use that to try and generate some positive change. But, and it's a big but, we do this while sticking to our aims and objectives and our values, whilst calling out the stuff that's wrong with our sector, such as marketization, institutional sexism, racism, transphobia, among other systemic issues, disgraceful levels of debt, and a mental health crisis that shouldn't even exist. We need to be fierce, clear, and committed in getting what's best for our members, but we also need to try and show some kindness, openness, and humility, and model the behavior that we expect our members to be treated with too.
Hilary, thank you very much indeed. A phrase you used, cutting through the noise. I'm sure it's a sentiment that all of you candidates agree with. You've got to be heard. You've got to land your messages. So Sajjad, to the question, how are you going to work with the stakeholders, the students at Bristol and Royal Holloway were interested in, other higher education institutions, regulators, and other educational organizations?
Well, building a strongest relationship with the stakeholders, charities, and communities would be the answer for that question. I personally neither agree or disagree with the traditional techniques being used by students' union leaders towards stakeholders, as I consider this as a 50-50 approach. What does it mean? It means as there works only last interactions with the stakeholders. For example, most of the students' union go to their stakeholders to bid for more money and in return of some agreed obligation. But my approach would be what I feel would be 80-20 approach, which means first meeting with the stakeholders would be to build a relationship, which will cover 40%. And then in the next stage, the leader should negotiate the term, which should constitute only 20% of that in total. And in the final stage, the leader should again focus on a retention of the relationship with the stakeholders, which will constitute another 40%. And this is how we need to build the relationship with the stakeholders and all the communities and charities.
Of course, the issue that lies beneath all of this is one of pragmatism. And we're going to stay with you, Sajjad, for the second question. You get first response. How do you actually make the change you want to? And this is a question that comes from SOAS, Students' Union. How should the NUS engage with the new Conservative government to best benefit its members? The question again, how should the NUS engage with the new Conservative government to best benefit members? And that's to you, Sajjad, to start with.
Thank you so much. So if you look at in the history, in the past, what NUS has failed to deliver the campaigns and achieve the campaigns is because of the relationship with the government. So the NUS main priority should be work with the current government, which would be NUS to work with conservative governments and education minister to deliver the national campaigns very well. So I need to look at, if I get elected, I need to look at what conversation we had as a national union body with the government and what did work well, what went well and what didn't work well with the government. So negotiation is the best tool to work with the government, because we can't criticize government when it comes to establish our achievements, to get our campaigns done. So we need to work with collaboration with the government towards a common goal, which would be students' betterment, making students' experience better across the country. So my roadmap would be to build the relationship with the government and looking into all the issues and giving them all the issues that our students are having. And going to Westminster Parliament is not just to debate and stand against the government, is to help government and is to work with government and is to convince them to achieve our campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajjad. Ross, do you agree, negotiate and work with, or is the relationship too damaged for that?
I think we have to take a sensible approach to it. If we're elected, we're going to be serving a 2-year term, and it's very unlikely that we're going to have a change of government in the next 2 years, which means we're going to have to take a positive approach to working with them if we want to make a serious change. Regardless of what you think about whichever party's in power, we have to recognise that the people working in government, delivering the strategies, do deeply care about education. People working in the Office of Students, different civil servants, the ministers, advisors, they might not always share the same politics as us, but there's always going to be a way to find common ground. And I think that if we address the issues that matter to us, it's about bringing positive change for students and getting them alongside on those issues. We saw this with the nursing bursaries that were achieved. It's a phenomenal win for NUS, who have not been allowed to take that point off the table. It's really been pushed and driven. It might not go as far as we want all the time, but the reality is that for students, that food's on the table, that it's their ability to study, it's their ability to choose nursing, and it's a better outcome for us as a country to be able to deliver that. So I'd say try and work positively as much as possible. Thanks,
Ross. Maisie, common ground, is that something that you think you can find?
No, not at all. I think NUS should be fighting the new Tory government every step of the way. And we should be doing what we can to scare them. And I think, we can do that through linking up with the trade union movement and getting out on the streets to resist the Tories, to resist the government, be mobilising student unions and students for mass actions, demonstrations and campaigns, on things like austerity, for a fully funded and public NHS, and against attacks on migrants' rights and for freedom of movement. And I think around COVID-19, we've got a Conservative government that is bailing out big business, but is content to let workers that make the services function in a situation where they're risking destitution, and that represents a lot of students at the moment. So, we need to make demands like full pay for people who are self-isolating, an end to zero-hour contracts and outsourcing in universities and everywhere. No sackings, and for things like rent to be freezed, for private hospitals to be requisitioned, to campaign against any evictions. Those are the kinds of clear radical demands that we need to be making in a time like now. And I think going back to higher education in 2012, the higher education bill that the Conservative government tried to push, the coalition government then tried to push through, was dropped because the student movement was lively and there was a big movement that fought it. And it was dropped because that big movement scared the government. And if you elect me, I want to scare the government a whole lot more. And I want to do that in partnership with like I said before, with our real stakeholders, with students and workers on campus, with trade unions and with working class communities that are fighting for a better world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maisie. Range of opinions. Hilary, you've heard talk of scaring the government. You've heard talk of collaboration and negotiation with, I think you yourself mentioned direct action as something that students are, of course, no strangers to. Where do you stand on working with the new Conservative government?
Thank you. I think my position is a lot closer to Ross's in that I think we've got 2 years of having these roles as VPHE, whoever of us get it. But in 2 years, it's unlikely that we're going to get this Tory government out. And so we have to find ways of working with them. And if working with them doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't working against them. It means that we're working to ensure that we get what is right for students. I really strongly believe that the NUS of the past is not going to be able to break through to a government that's set on silencing, ignoring, and disempowering us as a student movement. That doesn't mean that we should lose sight of our values or stop talking about them. We stand for the voices of our collective, not just the loudest and certainly not the most powerful. I think even across factions, the vast majority of us agree that education should be free from cradle to grave. It should be fully accessible and inclusive, and nobody should be left behind because they can't afford to learn. The next 2 years are crucial in re-establishing ourselves as powerful and re-energized in a sector that is too often left underfunded and neglected. It is important that we find ways of making it impossible for the government to ignore us. For me, it's you, the membership, that gives NUS the power, the voice, and the fire to unpick, dismantle, and destroy the measures that continue to make the experience of education less than what we deserve. There's so much going on right now where we actually have a chance to make some tangible, positive change, which will benefit our members, whether it's on fighting Brexit, looking at TEF, prevent, the attainment gap, mental health, well-being, support for disabled students, parents, carers, and healthcare students. Now is the time to pick our battles, roll up our sleeves, get around the table with the people in Westminster who have their hands on the levers of power, and to be clear, be fierce, and to be making sure our members' voices are heard and heard well. Mm-hmm. This Tory government might have a stonking majority, but that doesn't mean we don't have a point to prove, especially with students and young people. We need to hold their feet to the fire and deliver on areas where we win for our members. It isn't going to be sunshine and rainbows. We definitely won't agree on everything. But if we don't try and we aren't clever about it, then honestly, what's the point in NUS? We need to win for our students.
So it's interesting. You began by saying you stood close to Ross's perspective, but the end of what you just said there and holding feet to the fire, I heard tones of Maisie in there. But from the very, very big picture and that glimpse into what drives you, and thank you for sharing with us your own social agenda, I want to ask a much more specific question that comes from City University London, City University in London. It's interesting, where I went to do my postgrad, their students' union. And this, we're going to start with Hilary. There are a number of universities in the UK where over half of the student body commute on a daily basis. Yet the needs of these students are rarely understood, from timetabling to online resources, and a lack of tailored support for unions, which have large commuter student bodies. What will you, as a full-time elected officer, do for commuter students in the UK? And we'll start with you, please, Hilary.
Thank you. This is a really great question. I think it's especially pertinent given everything that's going on with COVID-19 and how it's affecting our institutions, and how it's really forced our institutions to put more accessible measures in to ensure that students can still get their educational experience, whether they're on campus or learning from home. Commuter students are often forgotten about. Their needs aren't met by a huge range of organizations and individuals. And honestly, I think we can all put our hands up and say we can and should be doing better for them and many other demographics within our membership, like mature students, parents, and carers. I think the first thing we would need to do as NUS is to understand the situation better before we jump to action. This requires hard work, engaging, and some careful and considerate listening from everyone. It's NUS's place to help lead the way on this and bring everyone with them. We need to understand the reasons why students commute, whether that be parent/caring commitments, work or volunteering commitments, because they can't afford to live on their campus doorstep or any other reason. From that, we then need to understand how these students want us to better support them, whether it's by getting rid of the 9 to 5 Monday to Friday campus culture, for example, or finding ways to better integrate them into our communities and foster a real and genuine sense of belonging. The answer here isn't getting these students to change their habits and move into halls. And anyone that might be telling you, the membership, that or is thinking that, is living a decade in the past. We have to recognize that change is inevitable and positive, that education delivery is adapting, and that NUS have to be at the forefront of shaping that to be better for our commuter students. I will lead a nationwide learning exercise in partnership with students across all the nations and regions, and we will bring the sector with us, because it's in your interest, it's in everybody's interest to learn too. Together, we'll develop a vision to better support those students and make sure that this vision is acted upon by universities, colleges, and the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. Sajad, you're at South Bank. Are you a commuter? Oh, I'm
yes.
sorry, we didn't have your mic on. Could you start that answer again, please? Are you a commuter, Sajad?
Yes, I'm a commuter student, and most of our students are commute as well.
And so what would you do for commuter students if you were Vice President Higher Education?
Well, efforts are being made towards understanding and solving commuter students' problems in terms of their support and what commuter students need. In consideration is concession travel and the flexibility of attending online lessons, for example, lecture capture. So at South Bank, one of the campaign I did, which was recording lectures. Panapto is the device which capture the lectures, and students, if they miss the first 1 hour or they miss the whole session, they can watch back later when they're at home. So yeah, these are the campaigns that university can do to make sure that commuter students don't miss any lessons or anything. And another, in terms of tailoring the cost, tailoring the solution could have possible cost implication. As my understanding, it is empirical to negotiate with the government and university to lobby the potential solution for commuting students in terms of special bus services, for example, for all the commuter students. In London, just an example, in London, most of the university are like not that far nearby. So if 5-7 university come together to do something for the commuter students, special bus services, those sort of plan we can give to the government, and government can establish some, or the university that can establish some better services for our commuter students. And if when you talk about outside London, most of the students live near campus. From my understanding, in London campuses, the city campuses, they have got more commuter students than outside the city campus. So we can focus on the city, big cities like Manchester, Birmingham, London. They all have a shared bus services, which can have a agenda for government, the plan for the government to work and make our commuter students experience better here in the country. Thank you.
Sajjad, thank you. Ross, you're in Birmingham. Any practical ideas for commuter students?
Yeah, we've actually done quite a lot here. So I've commuted whilst a postgraduate student into UCB. It's probably important to highlight that at my university, we have probably 50% West Midlands based students. Funny enough, one of our students running an election commutes from Plymouth, so that's about a 4-hour journey. So,
wow,
interesting
journey.
Yeah. So understand that the challenge that a lot of our unions are facing. There's definitely lots more we can do digitally. At UCB, we've been working hard on a digital first approach. That's looking at student engagement in terms of our actual governance and how we can include students in decision making and where our resources go. It doesn't replace on-campus activity, but if you're finding multiple ways to make students feel more engaged with the union whilst at home, hopefully it'll have a benefit. When they're on campus, with the limited time they do have, we know that the unions, we want to make sure that they know the union's there for them. They're more likely to get involved if they tell you what kind of activities and support that they want. We found this out by asking students desperately what they needed, and we found out that so many students needed access to car parking in Birmingham. We managed to actually negotiate a deal with NCP here, and that's actually saved hundreds of students thousands of pounds a year. It's important to notice as well, like I said, I was a commuter student. You can take a 15-minute drive, or you can spend an hour and a half on a bus in the same journey. So it's understanding if we can help the students have access to cheaper parking, it means they can drop the kids off at school rather than dropping out of university, which is a really important aspect when you consider the bigger aspect of their lives. It's sort of focusing around this idea of sticky campus, and whilst the students are on campus, how much they can benefit from that. Just knowing the fact that the union has their back and is on their side means they're more likely to come back to us again for their educational issues. I think central to this is a simple philosophy that when they're on campus, they're doing as much as possible to support them. And similarly, where we're online, we're giving them the online resources they need. That can be student to student, face to face, or Zoom to Zoom, as we're using today. It's going to be over the next few months that we're going to test this out. I think with the whole coronavirus issues, I think this is really the acid test to see how well it's going to go. And I'd probably encourage any of us to take that same approach. Especially with the way students are probably now feeling more isolated than they have done in the past if they're being isolated to the homes. As an officer at NUS, I'll be communicating with all unions the same way I'm doing now. I'm ringing you up, I'm asking you for your support, and I'm collecting student feedback. And I don't think that should change me being a VPHE. I probably advocate all officers at unions to do exactly the same as that, reach out to your students during this time. That's what's really going to make the difference and make them feel that they're valued to you.
Ross, thank you. And on commuters, Maisie, you at Birkbeck, a very significant proportion, if not the vast majority, will be commuting. What are your thoughts?
That's right. Yeah. Lots and lots of students at Birkbeck commute. We're an evening university, so our classes are exclusively after 5 p.m. My response to this question really is I think that public transport should be free. Look at the big measures being taken with the coronavirus, with COVID-19. We're in a time of emergencies, and we need big measures to save us. And I think making public transport free would be something that would help the climate, but it would also make so many people's lives better. Glasgow students have set up the Glasgow Student Forum, which is made up of students from all of the different universities in Glasgow. And they've found students on each of those campuses face huge problems with public transport. And a third of students in Glasgow have skipped a class because they couldn't afford the cost of a bus or a train ticket. So that's not necessarily even students who commute. It's students who have a short journey. And I think student poverty is a problem everywhere. And NUS should be running mass campaigns around bold demands like this.
Thank you, Maisie. Hilary, you wanted to say something about commuting.
Yeah, I think what's really important is that we recognize that these issues are very intersectional. I don't think that by taking an approach that will single out and not look at the full experience is the way forward in really tackling the issues that commuter students face. I think this is a wider issue that spans across widening participation. And when I was the widening participation part-time officer at Bristol, I did a lot of work in engaging students in the different identities they hold and really getting the university to really look into and dig deep into what these students actually need for their whole experience, and not necessarily just chuck money at the problem or put in short-term quick fixes. I think we need to really deeply look at the widening participation agenda and see how we can shape that to make all of our students feel like university can be fully inclusive for them.
And that participation challenge takes us very neatly onto the next question. Maisie will respond in the first instance to this. It's a question that comes from Harrow College Students' Union. And it's an interesting one. It's going to force you to think about the very definition of a student, if you like, and how you bring in as many people to the student representational body as possible. And the question is this: with the social and political climate rapidly changing in schools, how would you attempt to work with student councils and unions in primary and secondary schools to represent all students? That's from Harrow College Students' Union, and it goes to Maisie first.
Yeah, so I used to be a secondary school teacher, and I was also a primary school teacher. So I agree. I think that having student councils and student unions at a school level, even a primary school level, is really, really, really important. And I think the other thing there is that further education student unions often are incredibly underfunded, are often not autonomous from management. So I think that helping students working in further education to build up student unions there is really important too. So what this question made me think about actually is the youth climate strikes, which have been going on for a year now, and you've had school and college students across the world walking out of classes, striking every month, demanding radical action on climate change. And these have happened in the UK and in kind of every tiny town and city that you can think of. And they've been walking out of lessons, they've organised demonstrations, and they've built this huge movement from the bottom up with no resources and on a shoestring. And they've been doing this through kind of like hours and hours of work and debating and discussing the political demands and educating each other and sharing skills. And my sister's 14 and she's been really centrally involved in this as well. And they've done all of this with working with unions, with campaigning around clear radical demands, with collective direct action. And I think we should be doing the same thing. And actually, I think it's what can we be doing to help student unions be developed in schools, but it's also what we can learn from them. And I think we should be modelling ourselves in the same thing. We should be joining them every month, working with them and education trade unions to make these local climate marches huge, and trying to shut down our universities by organising mass student and worker walkouts and rallies, like the one on the 20th of September that Sheffield Student Union organised. So I think there's lots there that we can be working with them on, and local trade unions to pressure our schools and universities and councils in our local areas to significantly reduce carbon emissions, talking about the kind of radical demands that we need to tackle climate change, like ending airport expansion, nationalising energy and free public transport, and how we can win them. So I think what we've got to learn from them is the same model. It's about transforming our student unions in universities. It's about helping students get organised and getting rid of all of the bureaucratic hoops that are in the way of setting up society, being able to book a room and being able to put up posters that kind of limit the political activity and campaigning that ordinary students can get involved in. You know, we should have, like they spend a lot of their time discussing what their demands are going to be and what their tactics are going to be. We need to have mass general assemblies that are built for that, having these kinds of conversations. And we need elected officers that can be held to account by these mass general assemblies to call the shots. And at the moment, I think there's far too much power in the hands of managers and CEOs and unelected trustees. And student unions.
Speaking of elected officials, which you all obviously hope to succeed in securing your spot and support from the student electorate. Sorry to move you on, but I'm keen to get round everybody, and some very important reflections you made, Maisie, on the role of young people in really leading climate activism and the climate debate. To you, Hilary, the question from Harrow: as the VPHE, how would you encourage working with some of those younger student leaders in primary and secondary schools?
Yeah, I think this is such a pertinent question. I am a big believer in education being a holistic experience, and one that feels very joined up and together in from primary school right up into university and any other bits of education you'll do in between. I think young people, especially students in primary and secondary schools, and even in sixth forms, have really shown themselves to be so powerful, especially in the past few years. We've seen that with Greta fighting climate change, and we see that with Malala fighting for women's education rights. And we also see that with students in our movement constantly changing the world for the better. I think we need to build on this energy harnessed by young people, and really engage them in a way that is meaningful and impacts on their lives, so that they know that they could be the leaders of tomorrow. And that's a very generic thing to say, but I genuinely feel like young people are the answer. I think young people and students are leading the way yet again in the fights of our lives, from dialing up the noise for the climate crisis or fighting for liberation groups and everything in between. It's inspiring and it's powerful, and we need to make the hay while the sun is still shining on us. Regarding how I will attempt to work with students in primary and secondary schools, I think we're missing a substantial part here, the bit in between. I think this speaks to the wider, more disjointed education system that we live in here in England. I want to point you to some of the work that's been done in Wales and Scotland, for example, where there are efforts to make this all more joined up and embed student voice into the very fabric of education. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on this, and if elected, will work closely with colleagues in those nations and in England to learn the key lessons and identify how we use that learning to help join up and bring together our own systems. Thanks to some of the hard work and determination of our current VPs, we've seen the National Society of Apprentices join the NUS family this year. There's no reason why we can't iron out a way for primary and secondary school voices to be heard within our wider family. And I really strongly believe that that's something that NUS should be moving to as we grow in this new and reformed organisation.
Hilary, thank you for that. Sajjad, what ideas have you got? What have you seen that works well to widen the family and include younger student leaders in the work of the NUS?
Well, very recently, London South Bank University Lambeth College is one of the FE college has joined London South Bank, and we are working with the current presidents, the Students' Union presidents, how we can ensure that college student voices are getting heard. We are on the process to set up Students' Union as well there, proper students which can deliver all the campaigns. So from my understanding, all schools and colleges students, they need proper representation, means they need to have, union need to have a voice. For example, most of the FE colleges don't have a voice, students don't have voice because their union is not representing their student voices. So this conference will elect one full-time FE vice president. So my priority would be to work with FE vice presidents to support that FE vice presidents to achieve her or his campaign when it comes to FE colleges. Schools, I always say that university, we need to promote university activities to schools and colleges. For example, most of the university, they do HE Experience Day, where all the college students come to experience the HE sector, to experience university, how university looks like, for the same sort of, same kind of open day, but it's not open day, it's like HE Experience Day. I believe you all know that most of the university do. So we can promote, as a US National Union of Students, we can promote those events to our students, to schools and colleges. And number one priority would be to make sure the college, all the colleges that have union and their student voices are getting heard. That would be my answer to that question.
Sajjad, thank you. Ross, have you seen anything that works? Have you got any fresh ideas on this?
Yes, sorry about that.
That's right.
I think it sounds like a fantastic widening participation project that student unions could run on the ground from their SU, supporting school students to develop their student voice and using the amazing skills that we have in our union and sharing their skills. Be a fantastic thing to do. It's probably important to highlight that at UCB we have a 60-40 split between HE and FE, so I've worked quite a lot with college students to promote their student voice. I think it's probably important to highlight the challenge that they face. Like, lots of these students do come from WP backgrounds, haven't had the opportunity to raise their voice and to really maximise and utilise the student feedback that they share. So for a lot of them, it's a new project, and I think going to schools where that's not the culture is going to be a big change for that. To be honest with you, I'm not sure it's something that the NUS should be doing directly, but we should be doing more support for SUs who want to get involved in that project. This can be done through regional networks, something I'm quite passionate about, and facilitating unions to meet together and develop on projects that make a change in those areas. I think it's an opportunity to put some fantastic plans together to undertake this kind of work if it's something that's a priority for those unions. We want to be working smartly, taking advantage of the knowledge of those institutions themselves have. We want to make sure it's targeted. I think it's important to look at the work that Manchester Students' Union are doing with the Access All Areas project. I'm sure that NUS should be promoting the great work they've done there and give platform at conferences to tell others about the successes they've had and to how to get the ball rolling. Next week, I was actually planning to be visiting my old school to do a workshop about going to university. Fingers crossed that still goes ahead. I think that these approaches are really super impactful and would encourage all unions to start doing this sort of activity, because it does pay off in the long run when you see these students that perhaps have never thought about even attending college or university, and when they do arrive here, to see that the work that we've put in has paid off for them.
Thanks, Ross. And that's, of course, that is something that every student can do, is to maintain links with educational institutions that they have been through in the past, to show younger students, however young, that there is education available at every level and the sky's the limit. So look, from young to old, and I'm mindful that we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask you all to answer one final question, but briefly, if you could, in a minute or less, and we'll stay with Ross. From young to old, this is a question, well, older. From young to older, this is a question from the University of Wolverhampton Students' Union. More than 30% of students are over 35 years of age. Of them, more than 50% are over 40, but the needs of mature students are often forgotten. How would you go about increasing the representation of older students and hold the government to account for them? Ross, your 1 minute starts now.
Thank you. I think statistically at UCB, we have really great mature student engagement. And one of the ways that we've done this is by not attempting to impose the traditional student union experience on them. I think it's something that is a miss if mature students aren't joining Wednesday nights out, or they're not getting on the cheer team. is because it's not what they want to do. So we nail it by asking them and speaking to them regularly about what do they actually want. And what they're telling us is that they don't want necessarily social activities like meeting halls or cheese and wine evenings or postgraduate pizza nights. They want solid academic representation and a chance to be part of the academic community. And the huge successes that we've had in terms of student engagement in course-based societies and course-based communities where they've integrated within representation structures, which we've done really well. Mm-hmm. We've had 16 students running our elections for 5 positions, and I've actually seen a really broad engagement of mature students engaged in that as well.
Good to hear what you're doing on the ground. You've had your minute. Maisie, in 1 minute or less, if you can do it, how are you going to include mature students?
So I think mature students are the group who are most likely to be put off from entering higher education due to barriers like fees, rent, childcare, lack of grants, and the prospects of £60,000 debt. So I think that people will get involved in student unions and in NUS if they can see that we're making headway on and campaigning on these kinds of issues, that there's a clear way that's well advertised about how they can get involved in those kinds of campaigns. It's about running campaigns that everyone can get involved in.
Campaigns that are for the greater good, but obviously have a significant impact on the mature body themselves. Thank you, Maisie. Hilary, 1 minute, mature students.
Hi, so I think there's 2 sides to this. I think the first side is talking about how we are engaging mature students in regular student union activity like Ross was talking about. I think right now we're in a place where NUS is at the forefront of being able to engage older students into the kind of work that they do that has a big impact on their lives. So whether it's winning them nursing bursaries like we've seen recently, or making sure that student union events aren't just focused on things that might not be as accessible to mature students, I think that's really important. On the other side of it, I also think it's part of that widening participation work I was talking about making sure that we really look into and work together to find what the intersectional issues are for mature students and really make sure that they get really targeted support to have the best educational experience.
Hilary, thank you. Sajad, you have got the last word on the last question. Mature students, what are you going to do for them?
Well, from my personal experience at London South Bank, it was quite challenging to engage mature students with sports and societies. I think it's always challenging for every union. So from my understanding, what helps to engage mature students with the union plus to deliver something better for them is to organize some sort of employability workshop, because mature students, they are busy with a lot of other commitments. So when they see the employability opportunity, like different workshop, inviting people, we invited a lot of companies to come and talk to our students, and there was like a lot of mature students turn up on that day. So from my personal experience, I would say doing something like employability skills, making them more employable, and delivering some workshop for them to come to SUs or to engage with the movement, with the students movement, when they see there's something benefiting them. That would be my idea, to give them some employability skills, what they need and require to get a job in the real life. Thank you.
Sajad, thank you very much indeed. And I'm afraid that brings us more or less to a close. A whole host of your questions have been put to your candidates for Vice President Higher Education, from how do you work with the current government to what do you do about working with the Extinction Rebellion and Climate Campaign, younger students, older students. Your other questions will go to the candidates and they will be able to get back to you. A reminder of who's standing for that role: Maisie Sanders, Hilary J.B. Ababio, Sajad Hussain, and Ross Lovett. You've got great candidates. They've all got wonderful and brilliant and well thought out things to offer. So please have a think about who you will vote for and make sure you vote. Thanks for joining us.